Hello everyone, Dr. Timothy Elizondo here. Thought that I would send out a video to assist as we move through week number 4 of Philosophy 1. And I think the intention of this particular video is to discuss a few things. So first of all, I'd like to discuss where we are in the course. Then I would like to discuss the exam prompts that we have in front of us. And then perhaps also along the way, provide some tips and some suggestions of how an individual can be successful for these particular exams. All right, so with that in mind, we are currently in week number 4. So what that means is by the end of this week, students should have 2 outlines that they're submitting, one for each of the prompts. I'm going to collect them. I'll grade them. I'll provide you feedback and say, hey, think about this. Maybe consider this. Here's some ideas. And I'll send it back. And then in a couple of weeks, they'll be due again. I'm going to grade the second batch a little bit more strictly, more detailed. And if you get at least a 7 on those 2 outlines, you get to decide which of those prompts you would like to turn into a paper for your first exam. If you don't get a 7 on both of those outlines in the second round, we flip a coin and let fate or destiny decide. I say this because sometimes students receive a certain grade on the first outline and they're like, hey, I got an 8 on this outline, but on the second outline, I only got a 6. Why is that? And it's because I grade them differently. The first time I'm looking for, hey, are you on the right track? And the second outline, did you get to where you need to go? All right. So the first outline, I should be able to look at and get an understanding of your arguments, get an understanding of where you're drawing from, your particular places in the reading material. And in the second outline, I should also be seeing the analysis. I should be seeing some of the reasoning. I should not have to put myself into the outline for it to make sense. The first outline, yeah, I'll put myself into it to kind of make sense. I'll try. Second outline, I don't try. Okay, I try to just kind of read it for what it is and say, okay, is it there? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. All right. So with that in mind, we have 2 particular prompts in front of us. One is about the cancellation of philosophy at Columbia College, and the other one has to do with where one finds ontological certainty. And we'll discuss that in a second. Keep in mind that as you approach these particular prompts, you don't have to argue what you actually believe. I say this because sometimes students, or myself, we don't know what we believe. And what we believe is conflicting, and what we believe is confusing, and what we believe sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense. Instead, my suggestion is to find an argument that works. Right? There are some lines of reasoning or analysis that can be used for these prompts that just work. They're straightforward, but you have to find them. And sometimes we're so worried about what we actually believe in response to the prompt that we don't find those lines of reasoning. Okay, so this is just a thought exercise. It's really, to me, the intention of the class is, can a student design a written argument using philosophical ideas? The purpose of the class is not to really extract out what a student authentically believes and or knows about themselves in regards to a philosophical question. So, with that in mind. So in that context, the way that I would be approaching these particular exams is to be looking for a line of analysis that works. And as you're reading the material, if an essay or an idea doesn't assist you with the argument you want to make, I would skip it. Like maybe look at it and toss it to the side and put it in the bottom of the inbox, so to speak. Skip, 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 skip. Get to the good stuff. For example, chapter number 3. right? If I wanted to be using an argument about empiricism, I don't really know if I'd be paying a lot of attention to the essays about skepticism or about rationalism because they're really not helpful in allowing me to make the argument I want to make. Okay? All right. So for example, if I want to go out and I want to go surfing, right? I'm not going to go look at I don't know, I'm not going to go look at like, like the rafting material in a sports store because that's not what I plan to do. All right. Let's talk about the prompts. Prompt number 1 is, do we live in the matrix? Defend your position utilizing the ideas and contributions found in your course readings. Let's just stop there. As far as what the matrix is, the reading materials you have access to has various different definitions of the matrix, particularly the book within our course readings called The Philosophy of the Matrix. It's located in the supplemental reading materials, and different authors define the matrix in different ways. Some define it as Plato's cave, the metaphor for Plato's cave. Some say it's a simulation of a computer. And then there's others. Depending on how you define it, that has different implications. For example, if a student says, well, it's like the movie, man, it's a computer simulation that's run by machines. I'm like, okay, but that implies that there's a computer in a reality and that human beings are in pods and their brains are in a computer and our consciousness is in the machine. And if you want to work with that idea, you can. Versus others who say, no, man, it's a metaphor for a cave. It just means that we're kind of in the dark and we're stumbling around a lot. We can't find our way out because there's a fireplace and it messes with the way we see shadows. I'm like, oh, okay, that's different. So how one defines the matrix is going to have major implications for the argument. Personally, I would be looking for the one that's the simplest. That's just me, because I don't like working with complicated ideas too much. Makes my brain head hurt. But the prompt is then asking, what's the criteria needed to address the question? Where does one find the kind of ontological certainty needed to address this set of issues? In other words, how do we know what we know? The textbook breaks it into 3 schools of thought. Kind of like playing a video game where you must determine, are you a fighter? Are you a wizard? Or are you a thief? 3 separate paths, no multi-classing. Choose a particular path. They're like, well, all right, skepticism, that says you can't know anything, we're never gonna. It's like, okay. Empiricism says, well, empiricists believe that knowledge is anchored somehow with the senses. They don't all agree, but that's their starting point. And the rationalists argue that there's reasoning, that there's some sort of mental processes we can use in our brain that help us discover the truth. We can calculate that 4 plus 4 is 8. So much like, I don't know, putting on a hat, try on different hats to see what makes you have the ability to make the simplest argument. So in your outline, I would advise somewhere in the outline, be like, this is this guy here, this philosopher says, this is how we know knowledge, I'm going to go with that. So this is the definition of the matrix, this is how we know, and as a result, can we get out of this first thing? If the matrix is a coffee cup, and I know things because the empiricists let me feel my way out, can I get out of the coffee cup? Yes or no? There are certain lines of thinking that will problematize the answer. So it's kind of like a mix and match book. Depending on what you pick, it may not work out. And some students wrestle with the conclusion, try to get out. My suggestion is no. Find a simpler, look, white shirt, blue jeans, classic. The prompts are not necessarily designed to trick students, but they do ask students to find combinations that work together. Let's talk about the second one. The second one is about Columbia College leadership will be announcing the cancellation of the philosophy department. In this context, what would you argue in response to a faculty member's assertion that the kinds of skills, ideas, and discussions are not as important as those associated with a more vocational-oriented discipline? Support or refute this position, utilizing the ideas and contributions in your course readings. Okay. Here's what I mean by that. I find myself in faculty meetings all the time where they're talking about funding, they're talking about hiring, and they're talking about how do we spend money at Columbia with our very limited resources to build the college in a way that's helpful for the student population and the community as a whole. Resources are limited. So what direction should we build? And as I'm sitting there, the fire faculty is like, we need equipment, and we need this, we need trucks, we need hoses, because the forests are getting drier and fire's a threat. We need money. And the child development faculty, and they're saying, well, we need funding because we are a growing program who has a lot of bright young students that are coming here to learn how to raise our children for the future. And then here I am, raise my hand and say, okay, yes, but I am the philosophy department, and how do we know what we know? And they say, okay, well, what's the purpose of that? I'm like, yeah, well, critical thinking. And then they look at me and say, yeah, we don't know about the future of the philosophy department here at Columbia College. So this prompt is asking, does Columbia College specifically need a philosophy program? Because the textbook's going to have lots of different arguments about why philosophy is wonderful, why philosophy helps to develop critical thinking, why philosophy helps us to have a better understanding, if not a true understanding, of what is or what is not knowledge. But do we need it? Is it pragmatic or useful? The prompt is asking students to justify the argument of why it is necessary, or perhaps it's not. However, regardless of the two prompts, the responses in your outlines should draw from the course readings. So if you're sitting there watching this saying, yeah, man, we don't need philosophy, I'd say, okay, that you could go in that direction, but you still have to draw from the course readings to make that argument. And that might be tricky considering it's a bunch of philosophy people, writing about how wonderful philosophy is. But here's the tip. Here's a suggestion. I would be looking at the course readings to try to get an understanding of not why philosophy is good, but what happens when we don't ask the questions or have the discussions around the unique set of questions that philosophy asks. What happens when we no longer ask the question of what is knowledge, or what is justice, or what is God? And instead, we leave it to the media, or we leave it to the religious leaders, what happens in that void? Because there are specific essays that warn us what the threat is if we fail to investigate or ask those kinds of questions. So, to summarize the big tips from this video, as far as the matrix, define the matrix in a specific way that is clear and helpful. 2, choose a specific path from chapter 3. You've got the skeptics, which branch out to global and local. You've got, or you have the empiricist route that branches off into different ways of degrees, I would suggest, of exactly how certain they are between what I feel and what is. I tapped that, therefore there must be something there. Or the rationalists who make the argument that reasoning or our thought process can lead us to certain types of fundamental truths. Personally, when I think about the definitions of the matrix and the paths I can take in chapter 3, personally, I like the idea of a cave and epistemology because I like the idea of making the argument that I either can or cannot feel myself or my way out of a big, deep, dark cave. Okay. Am I ever going to get out? I don't know, because maybe I'm going to think I get out, but I'm still not out, so I'm trapped. Okay. But maybe I can get myself out if I sense my way out of things. And in the second prompt, not being enchanted by the arguments about why philosophy is good, but instead why it leads to positive benefits, or how avoiding it leads to certain harms and consequences, and then attempting to contextualize that in Tuolumne County. Right, because Tuolumne County is a specific place where Columbia College is located. So maybe, yeah, we need philosophy at, I don't know, Berkeley, but do we need it at Columbia? Don't know. The place we are might impact the answer. All right, so with that, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the questions to the instructor. Also in this module is episode number 2 and 3, where I design my own outline while I'm trying to complete one of the prompts. Hope everything's going well. I look forward to interacting with you and your work as we move forward. And other than that, I'll see you perhaps in the future. All right, bye.